Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, Pacific Rim. As a war between humankind and monstrous sea creatures wages on, a former pilot and a trainee are paired up to drive a seemingly obsolete special weapon in a desperate effort to save the world from the apocalypse. It stars Charlie Hunnam, most famously of Sons of Anarchy, and Idris Elba, most famously from The Wire. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, who I think of as the guy behind Pan's Labyrinth, but who also did the superhero movies Hellboy and Hellboy 2.
Ah.
The first thing I noticed, Bob, is no really big blockbuster style movie stars in this movie.
No, you had to remind me of where I should remember these actors from because I haven't seen all of those other productions that you mentioned. So, unless you're like a big TV fan, which we try to be or we tend to be, yeah, these aren't movie stars by the traditional definition, which is probably a good thing. I don't think the movie was about them as much as it was about other things, and it worked well in that way.
And I want to say it was also very well cast for these not being, big time movie stars. I like Idris Elba as what's his name, Stryker, um,
Striker.
as the guy who had been a pilot but then graduated to be the head of the Jaeger force. And we got to learn some background. He also could be a hard ass, but a softie. I thought he was well cast. And Charlie Hunnam, this is like the thing he's best at in the entire world. Like if you watch Sons of Anarchy, he's like this young guy, tons of talent and energy and masculinity, and he needs to learn to keep it together better. He's like on the verge of spiraling out of control always, but it's that riding the line that makes him so compelling, and that's
Mm,
like exactly what was needed for this role.
yeah.
And so I thought it was pretty well cast, even though they're not big stars.
Yeah, and you make it sound like what he was trying to accomplish by writing that line is like a really complicated and nuanced character, which it could have been, but it also could just be stereotypical and like, the bad boy who is good, but it pushes the envelope too far. I don't know. In the movie, it was somewhere in the middle for me, but maybe we should do our mini reviews, set the tone here a little bit, see what we each think of this, right?
Okay, sounds good. Do it.
All right, so here's what I gave it. Pacific Rim, 3.5 out of 5. Robots and monsters, oh my! Enjoyable enough as a well-paced guilty pleasure of what were the best parts of sci-fi when I was like 12. Nowadays, though, I want a bit more out of my characters and story.
Interesting. Well, I'm gonna have to sheepishly admit that I don't have my mini review typed out, but I'll give you the highlights. Also, a mini
Okay,
review on the fly.
let's do it.
Um, one thing I've already hinted at, non A-list movie stars, but still really well cast. Um, Almost too much story, but that's a refreshing change. And very characteristically Guillermo del Toro. For dun 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 3.5 stars.
Wow.
Wait. Did I say 3.5? That's what you said. Four.
Yeah,
Four.
four. That's what I heard the first time, and I
Four
was like,
stars.
did my ears deceive me? Logan is giving an action summer blockbuster movie a higher rating than me? I don't know what that means, but it feels significant.
Yeah, well, of all the ones I've seen, um, I think it's the one that I'd recommend as most. I guess I mean Star Trek. I think I gave four or four so stars. Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to it. Those are our mini reviews, and yeah. What did you think about the story? You wanted more from this story. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm surprised that you almost had too much of it. I felt like I liked the premise and the way it starts out, by the way, is they have kind of a narrator for the first 5 or 10 minutes, which is kind of um, just like boom, 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 sets it up very directly. Here's the premise. Here's these giant monsters. We had to adjust as a society and create giant robots to fight these giant monsters that come out of the earth.
Yeah, didn't you feel like that almost could have been its own movie? Like, we don't know what's happening. We scramble to try to defeat a few of them while we're trying to put together this program, and then we finally start kicking their asses. That could have been like a whole movie, right?
Right, it could have been, but this movie was more about the, fast forward, and this has been happening for a long time, and we're now losing, and we're more like a resistance, and how do we stop the world from coming to an end? Which is a decent premise on its own, but I felt like the premise that was rushed through maybe was a little bit more interesting. And the other point of the story that was rushed through which I wanted more from, was the political scene. So we have politicians come into play midway through the movie, and there's a couple of options like, hey, we can build giant robots and make more, or last resort, put it all together and keep going and doing this, or we're going to build a giant wall, and then you see like a screen of politicians debating, and it seemed like reminiscent of today, different solutions for a complicated problem, but this one was a pretty massive problem for the whole world. But then it's quickly dismissed, and the movie becomes more about just the military dudes in control, and there's no connection to Washington anymore, or global UN headquarters or whatever it is. And so that was disappointing for me.
You're right, that was rushed through. In fact, I practically even forgot about that whole thing until you mentioned it because it was such a minor afterthought.
Yeah. So why was it so much? Why was there tons of story for you? And maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, the way I'm
Well,
assuming it is.
like I say, I felt like that first part could have been its own movie. I felt like it was almost like a trilogy smashed into one movie. And
Mm,
so we got, I mean, Raleigh, played by Charlie Hunnam. It was practically like the whole hero's journey, but just a sketch of it. If that had been more of the story, I might have thought it would be more effective and let it breathe more because he starts off being really promising. He has this huge defeat that makes him question himself and go into hiding, and then they come back and find him. No, you're our last hope because everyone else is dead, and then he comes back, and it turns out that even though he's a little bit outdated, and the Jaeger he drives is antiquated, it turns out that being old is a reason that he can triumph in the end.
right.
These are spoiler free, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Still,
so that could have been a whole movie arc in its own. But that doesn't describe the whole movie if I just say that, right? And I think also Strikers, his whole story could have been a story about a guy who well, it's hard to say that without so many spoilers, um, but he had some success, then he had to change career paths, and he made it to be the leader, and then at the end he finds a measure of redemption on his own, where he thought that he might not find any. That could have been, if that had been allowed to breathe and been more fleshed out, that could have been an interesting story too. I just felt like there were all these storylets, but we didn't focus on any one of them quite well enough.
no. So I think we are agreeing here. I think we're saying the same thing because I wanted more from the cohesive story, like society at large, and what we got were like three. Because there's also the Japanese girl. She has her own story, and she also gets like a pretty sophisticated flashback scene, which takes a lot of time and is
Yeah.
kind of cool from a special effects perspective. But it's just like one more uh, character expose or whatever you want to call it, and it's ironic because what I wanted more from was characters in the story, according to my mini review. But everything I got from these individualized stories was kind of a half-assed approach, or just not satisfying enough. And it really wasn't about a cohesive story or a really interesting character arc, or character-driven drama. It was just like, oh, we got to show you the token flashback for our lead actors in the show, and then they all come together and save the world for different reasons or whatever. And that felt a little too Hollywoody maybe. But I guess what do we do, you know?
Yeah, well, that's fair. And I mean, I just liked it that I saw the outlines of a story that I recognize, and I feel like in so many movies lately I haven't, even though you're right, it's half-assed. For example, one of the scenes that I remember um, was when Raleigh, this, our young Charlie, or not so young Charlie Hunnam pilot, he's going to figure out if he's going to be paired with the girl Mako, and they have this fight. It's like this choreographed
Yeah.
thing, and then she's Chinesey with the bow, and he's pretty good, but he just doesn't look as smooth. He looks like this American choppy, even though he's English, this Western choppy guy who's good but not quite as smooth. And then at the end, they're like, "Did you feel it? Did you feel it? We were obviously meant to be together." And I'm like, "What? I didn't feel it watching. What are you talking about?"
Right. Well, and the movie does play, fast and loose with some of these, with some of its premise of like, connecting brains and memories being shared by this new technology that just so happened to be invented just in time to be the pivotal point of how to control giant robots in a way that makes sense to take on giant monsters. And now we're like, it like the movie's based in like 2020 or something, and it has like some Star Trek-esque technology that normally you don't give the Star Trek pass unless you're a Star Trek movie, and it's 1,000 years later. But like 5 years later, and now we can meld minds together. I don't know.
I gave it a pass on that one, but you're right. Oh, my dog wants to make his first appearance on the cast here. Oh, you little silly dog. Um, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Guillermo del Toro imprint on this. Like I
Yes.
said, I think of him mostly as Pan's Labyrinth, which is a very different kind of movie. But he's also done Hellboy and Hellboy 2, which weren't huge budget necessarily, but they were sort of in this vein of action movies that are ambitious with visual effects and with
hmm
big archetypal storylines. Are you a big Guillermo del Toro fan?
I mean, I've seen both Hellboy movies, and I like them fine enough, kind of in the same category as this. I don't think I gave them ratings in the same scale, but they're probably 3.5 out of 5 movies. And Pan's Labyrinth actually is a step above. I like that movie quite a bit. Um, so, long story short, yeah, I consider myself a fan enough, I guess.
And I could see very much the visual style of Guillermo del Toro. My favorite part that I just went back and it just put a smile on my face, and I thought, yeah, that's Guillermo, was when Charlie Day's character is looking for Hannibal Chow, played by Ron Perlman, and he finds him in just this room that's like all the different kinds of red you can imagine, and his outfit is like the best, has like this crushed velvet pattern with like this red leather vest and the striped red shirt and this paisley red tie
Yeah.
and just these gold shoes and these glasses. I don't know, just so red and so
Yeah.
stylized. I just loved that.
Yeah, Del Toro does like set design matched with costume design. Like he really takes the whole scene and makes it its own. Like he did that in Hellboy a lot too. There's just
Yeah.
lots of intricate detail, and it's very deliberate how the character's outfit and style kind of matches the atmospheric setup as well. And there's intricacies all over if you're looking for them. I felt in this movie he might have been stifled a little bit almost because when he does these giant scenes, and I guess we'll get to this with the special effects, you see his kind of stamp of approval or footprint on it, but then you see like a lot of other stuff that makes you feel like, oh, this is just any old, giant robot special effects. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's like it's just this weird contrast of like this artsy, unique spin on being creative in the way you put together these set designs, and then there's just what you'd imagine giant Legos looking like, and he had to sort of mash those together somehow.
Yeah, when I think of Guillermo del Toro, and because he designs his monsters and aliens really distinctively with all these exaggerated features and
hmm
long drawn out lines and intricate designs and things like that. And I was looking for that, and I kind of sort of thought I saw some of that sometimes in the robots and in the monsters, but not as much as I was hoping for. So I agree with that.
Right, and it was mostly the robots. I think he had a little more of a free pass, or maybe it's just the by definition monsters you can do a little bit more with. But I feel like this is going to be like a nerd alert moment, but the movie's premise suffered from the fact that it had giant robots, and that was fundamentally part of the story. And there were so many scenes where I just felt like, why are they giant robots? Is this really the best humanity can do? Why is fighting monsters solved by giant robots other than it would make for a good sci-fi movie? And there's just a lot of funny scenes that aren't intentionally funny, where it's like, fire your rockets. Oh no, I don't think that'll work. Okay, well, use your giant sword. And it's like the giant sword that comes off of the giant robot arm you're controlling. It's like, why? This doesn't make any sense at all in terms of
And that was like the
like,
best weapon of the whole thing. Once I started using that, they were really kicking ass.
yeah, there's so many scenes. Like another example that drove me crazy because it was obvious that it was just like a throwaway token, this is a summer movie, is like one scene where they're fighting a giant alien. They like pick up, I don't know if it was a bus or, no, it was a giant freighter ship. And they like pick it up and use it like a baguette to smack the
Yeah, yeah.
monster. And it's like, hey, if you're going to spend, if the collective universe of humanity on this planet is going to get together and spend billions of dollars to construct giant robots, you think that what they put in the fists would be a little bit better for hurting an alien than picking up a ship as a baguette. But that's just those little things that maybe only I care to point out.
For some reason, I let myself get swept up in the in the reality as it presented it to me, things like that. But you're right. Obviously, if you look for things like that, you'll find plenty of them because it is that kind of
Yes,
movie.
right.
So yeah, I think so overall, it's a thumbs up for us.
Yeah, I think it's an enjoyable, it's escapism for me. I called it a guilty pleasure because I didn't think the acting wasn't bad. Oh, and that's another thing. Charlie Day, who's most famous for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he plays a scientist, and it's just, and then he's already like a stretch. But then there's some other dude that's I don't know where he's from. I should have looked it up, but he plays a scientist who's even quirkier. And they're just like hammy over the top like mad scientist characters in the sci-fi movie. Like they don't even try to like make them seem plausibly, normal in terms of what a scientist could be in real life. But it's part of the
Well, they're a
gimmick.
little
It's part of
comic
the
relief, I guess. I don't know. I thought they were amusing,
yeah,
but what you say is right.
right. Yeah, this is definitely like a guy's night out, guilty pleasure sci-fi extravaganza with special effects and robots fighting monsters. There's not much depth. You're not going to see anything about how humanity deals with the end of the world. That's not as much the point as the just robots bashing on aliens point. So I
I
don't know.
thought it was appropriately stirring though in the speeches around. Let's do this or whatever he says.
Right?
Let's
Yeah. I
conquer.
mean, the military driven, this is our last stand. Humanity's relying on us and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was fine. It was good. I just wanted more scale and scope because I kept realizing that it's just this small resistance force, but you didn't get to see like all the other countries or politicians figuring out the end of the world together. But in the context that it was, sure, it presented it pretty fairly.
All right, so 4 stars from me, 3.5 from you, Bob. There you go, Pacific
Yeah,
Rim.
check it out.